When we talk about the environmental crisis, our minds usually jump to things like tech solutions or new policies, right? But what if we're looking in the wrong place? What if the real root cause is much, much deeper? Today, we're going to dig into a pretty radical idea that maybe, just maybe, to save the planet, we have to fix our society first. And our guide for this journey is a really powerful book, Murray Bookchin's The Philosophy of Social Ecology. Bookchin's whole argument is that, yeah, carbon emissions and plastic in the ocean are bad, but they're just symptoms. He says the actual disease, well, it's woven into the very fabric of our social structures. Right off the bat, Bookchin hits us with these huge questions. He's basically saying, hey, forget about the technical stuff for a second. He wants us to wrestle with the big philosophical picture. And the stakes couldn't be higher. He's pretty much telling us our very survival hangs on how we decide to answer these. So here's how we're going to break this all down. First, we'll get to know the man behind the ideas, Murray Bookchin. Then we'll tackle his critique of how we normally think, something he saw as a huge trap. After that, we'll get into his alternative, this really fascinating philosophy that ties our social world directly to the ecological crisis. And finally, we'll bring it all home and talk about why this stuff is so incredibly relevant right now. All right, so first up, who exactly was Murray Bookchin? Where did this intellectual challenger come from? Well, Bookchin was a radical thinker through and through his entire life. You can see his journey here, starting out as a young communist, getting disillusioned, and then carving out his own path. He moved through Trotskyism and anarchism, eventually landing on his own unique blend of ideas, libertarian socialism and what he called social ecology. The guy was clearly not afraid to question everything, including the big ideas of the day and even his own beliefs. So as he developed these ideas, Bookchin realized he was up against a really powerful opponent. But it wasn't a person or a political movement. Nope. It was something way more subtle, something hiding in plain sight that we all use every single day. He called it conventional reason. So what is this conventional reason? Think of it as our everyday analytical toolbox. It's the logic that says A equals A, period. A rock is a rock. It's super useful, right? I mean, you need it to build a house or fix a car. But Bookchin's big warning was that this way of thinking becomes a massive trap when we try to understand things that are alive and constantly changing, like a forest or a human society. He had a perfect analogy for this. Billiard balls. Picture it. One ball hits another. Simple cause and effect. The second ball moves. But here's the key. The balls themselves don't fundamentally change. They're just static objects bouncing off each other. And that, Bookchin says, is exactly how conventional reason views the world, as a bunch of separate, unchanging things just interacting. And this is where we see the big problem. Conventional reason gives you a snapshot in time. It's like it can look at a baby and it can look at an adult and analyze them as two different things. But it completely misses the most important part, the process of the baby becoming the adult. To see that, Bookchin says we need a different tool, what he calls dialectical reason. This is a way of thinking that's all about development, history, and how things unfold over time. Again, this conventional logic is fantastic for certain tasks. You want to build a bridge? Perfect. But the danger, and this is a huge point for Bookchin, is when we think it's the only way to reason. Because this logic has no room for ethics or values. It sees them as just personal opinions. And what you get is this cold, impersonal, bureaucratic machine that can manage things with terrifying efficiency, but it can't ever stop to ask, hey, is what we're doing right? Is it sustainable? Okay, so if conventional thinking is the trap, what's the way out? Well, Bookchin lays out a whole new way of seeing things. He calls it dialectical naturalism, and it's all about looking at the world and seeing its hidden potential. The core idea here is something he calls potentiality. It's a really simple but profound concept. It just means looking at something not just for what it is right now, but for what it could be. It's a way of seeing the world that's focused on growth, on the process of becoming. The best example, the one he uses all the time, is an acorn. If you use that old conventional reason, an acorn is, well, it's a nut. You can analyze its chemicals, its weight, whatever. But if you look at it through this lens of potentiality, what do you see? You see an oak tree. The acorn isn't just a static thing, it's an oak tree in the process of becoming. Its whole being is geared towards realizing that potential, growing into something more complex, more itself. Okay, and here's the leap. This is where it gets really radical. Bookchin takes this exact same logic from the acorn and applies it to us. to society. He says that a society that doesn't achieve its potential for freedom, for justice, for rationality, it's just like that acorn that gets eaten by a squirrel. It's an unrealized potential. It might exist, sure, but it's a distorted, incomplete, and fundamentally irrational version of what it could be.
All right, so this is the moment where all these big philosophical ideas slam right into the real world. This is the heart of what he calls social ecology.
And here it is, the central claim. The attempt to dominate nature comes directly from the domination of human by human. You see, he's saying our environmental crisis isn't the real problem, it's a symptom. The root cause, the actual disease, is how we dominate each other. He argues we couldn't even have imagined conquering nature until we first created systems to conquer and control other people. So let's walk through the logic here. Step 1. Ecological problems are actually social problems. Okay. Step 2. The whole idea of dominating nature didn't just pop out of nowhere. It grew out of the very real experience of people dominating other people in hierarchical societies. Once you have that mindset of domination, you start applying it to everything. People and nature are just seen as resources to be used up. And if you follow that chain of logic, you end up at his big conclusion. You can't have a truly ecological society without first having a non-hierarchical, free, and cooperative one.
Okay, so this is all really interesting philosophy, but so what? Why does this actually matter for us today? Let's bring it from thought into action.
Well, for one thing, it's a massive challenge to how most of us think about environmentalism. Bookchin is basically saying that changing your light bulbs or buying a tote bag, it's not going to cut it. Those things are nice, but they're dealing with the symptoms, not the disease. His point is, as long as our society is built on a foundation of hierarchy and domination, we'll just keep finding new, maybe even greener, ways to exploit the planet and each other.
So in the end, Bookchin doesn't hand us a simple 5-step plan. What he does is leave us with a really powerful and honestly pretty uncomfortable question. He's forcing us to look inward at our own societies and ask, can we really fix our relationship with nature if we haven't first fixed our relationships with each other? What if the real source of the problem isn't out there in the atmosphere, but right here in the way we've organized our own lives? And that question, it changes everything.